Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz. For the time being, I'm going to release episodes twice a month. And with the exception of today's episode and one coming up in August, each of those episodes will be brand new conversations with some of my favorite interview guests. So if you missed last week's episode, it was with Susan Laz, Principal and CEO of Ridgewell's Catering. And today's release is a revisit of an amazing and informative interview with two well-known industry pros, planner-designer Laurie Arons and photographer Jose Villa. Both of today's guests have been on The Wedding Biz multiple times. Laurie Arons of Laurie Arons Special Events has been featured in numerous magazine publications and was listed in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Martha Stewart Weddings as one of the top planners worldwide. Fine art photographer Jose Villa is considered by many to be the top event photographer in the world. He's been published in numerous magazines and was named one of the top wedding photographers by Martha Stewart Wedding, Harper's Bazaar, Style Me Pretty, and Vogue. He was also named in the top 10 photographers in the world by American Photo magazine. And PDN named Jose one of the most influential photographers of our decade. He also runs workshops and authored the book Fine Art Wedding Photography. Enjoy this conversation with both Laurie Arons and Jose Villa. Hey, Laurie and Jose, this is so cool having you on together. I mean, you both have been on the show separate times, multiple times, amazing interviews for both of you. But to have you on at the same time is so cool. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
Yeah. So, one of the first things that I'm thinking about, given that I've got you both on the line, I mean, Laurie as a planner, designer, and Jose as a photographer is, in terms of how you both work best together in those positions, Jose, I'll ask you first. And at any time, you both can cut in at various times. This is a conversation. So, Jose, starting with you, what is it that you need the most when you think of a partnership with a planner and designer so that you can feel really comfortable doing and getting done what you need to do? What are some of the key elements?
Well, there's definitely a bunch for sure. To have a successful outcome. One of the first things, though, that I think for me that really inspires me is locations. One of the questions really is, okay, when's the wedding, and where is the wedding? And that right there sort of gets my sort of wheels turning as to sort of even just immediately how I might even approach photographing at that location. So, there's a lot of things, but location is very key. Obviously, communication is very key. And into just talking about and brainstorming about, how we can make this a special event for the client.
Yeah. And Laurie, what about you? What would be kind of the main elements, when you're thinking about what to look for in a great photographer who you can work really effectively with?
Yeah, I definitely look for a photographer that has a lot of experience in shooting with clients like mine and kind of bigger productions like I produce. There's a lot of detail and a lot of moving pieces, and they're typically not very cookie cutter at all. So having that experience and that confidence going into it is super helpful. I'm in love with film photography and always have been. And Jose is obviously one of the top film photographers in the world. So that's helpful. Yeah. And a team player for sure. I don't want the photographer to come in and need to be babysat too much. I want to have a lot of communication up front and a detailed timeline and go through it. But when the day starts, I want the photographer to always be there and not be off eating or doing their own thing. I want to make sure that they're totally committed to the success of the event so that the client in the end is super blown away and they have no regrets.
Yeah. Look, obviously both of you are super high-end quality, and so I'm sure that plays into how much you enjoy working with each other. But do you both have maybe a story or two of when I say that? Is there a wedding or an event that pops into your mind first, and you can give a little detail on how you work together on an event?
I mean, there's a lot of weddings that we have in our repertoire together.
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been working together for, I would say, maybe getting close to 10 years, I think. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of really amazing moments, some stressful moments, of course. That's just the nature of what we do.
Like what? What would be a real stressful moment that you've both had to deal with?
Oh my goodness. I think for me on my side, it's just there's so many things that I want to capture that I see in my mind of wanting to get like as a final product. And sometimes I feel like we're going to have time or like I have this exact way of how I'm going to photograph it. And then I just get in my head, I get in my head about like not getting certain things. And sometimes I think I overthink things too. So I stress myself out sometimes. But, I think mostly like the good news with working with Laurie is, she's got an amazing team. And so, and her clients are very incredibly creative and have so many beautiful things for me to photograph. And we're always on time. It's always that. But I just think for me, it's always more like in my head about how stressful I can get, like thinking, did I get that? Did I not get that? And wanting to make sure that the client has like an incredible experience throughout. So internally, I think I kind of get a little bit like frazzled. But the good news for me is I don't really show it.
Yeah.
I'm not the type of person that like freaks out or, like visually, I'm not like, verbal, like, and yell at people and get all crazy. But internally I'm like, let me get all this, because I think sometimes I'm faced with so much. Like what I will say about Laurie's events is that there's always something happening, and meaning in a good way. Like for me as a photographer, there's always something for me to capture. So there's constant go, 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 go moments, where there's a lot of details, there's a lot of moments, there's a lot of, surprises or whatever you may think of moments wise. I think Laurie does an amazing job to create those moments for me and for the client first and foremost, but for me as a photographer. So I'm constantly like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I sometimes try to figure out a way to not like be obvious about being so like crazy and hectic on the day, if that makes sense, because there's so much beauty and so many things going on. And all of Laurie's weddings are all custom, so they're all just so different in what we're photographing throughout. Yeah,
Laurie, I imagine that you're constantly thinking, especially when you're working with Jose, on, hey, there's going to be a moment here. Let me grab him. Here, this is going to be a moment. Oh my God, that we're outside and the environment. And, how does it go for you?
I try to keep Jose informed of as many special details as I can. We're in deep going into the wedding weekend with all the guest correspondence and all the changes and all the client management. So sometimes it gets there's a lot on our plates to get to where we're going. So honestly, I don't see Jose nervous ever. He's got an amazing team that is really seasoned and knows him really, really well. So you never know with Jose that he's frazzled. And honestly, one of the things that I care about a lot is what Jose cares about, and that is doing our very best to capture and to be able to put onto film memory all of these things that the client spent money on and thought about and created. So Jose cares deeply about all of those aspects, and he's never not there. Like I can't even I don't even remember a time where I'm like, where's Jose? Like, why isn't he here to like capture this toast? Or why isn't he here to be in the room when we're opening the room and we've got to get all the room shots? He's there before me. Like he's always thinking ahead. And I think we talked on another podcast about how important we take our work and how I get butterflies like before the ceremony. And it's like, it's go time. And like, we're basically in live theater with not actors, but with real human beings. And the fact that I get butterflies shows me that I still care and that I love what I do. And like what Jose's saying is he also gets butterflies. Like he's in his head because he's thinking a lot about it. And there are photographers who show up that really don't think about it. And that to me is a downfall, and it does end up affecting the ultimate photography for the client in the end.
Yeah, it's interesting. You both talk about butterflies. I'm thinking myself in my music business when I was performing, it's like, yeah, it's interesting. I think back, it actually put me in a good place because it made me hyper aware, and on edge in a good way, in a positive way, on edge, to be able to take everything in. So it sounds to me like, that there's got to be an enormous amount of preparation between the two of you ahead of time so that you don't have to worry about anything like this in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The interesting thing is I was trying to think of stories with Jose, but like, obviously there are stories where the bride isn't super happy with how she looks, with hair and makeup. And we tried everything to avoid that with trials. But on the day of, like, if the bride wants her hair redone, the bride gets her hair redone. And, I'm obviously, I'm in the background going, we're late, we're this, we're that. Like, we've got to keep going because there's a lot on the line. But in the end, the bride has to be on time. So that's one thing that I know happens to Jose a lot. And then you're losing light, and you're losing your opportunities to get these moments. You're affecting the guest experience if the ceremony goes off late. So sometimes he's pivoting all the time with us, and there's weather. So sometimes it's windy or it can rain. Luckily, it doesn't happen very often in California where I'm based, where we have like weird rainstorms, but that affects his life a lot. And he's like having to rethink, and because he can't go back to those moments, typically. So the stress on the photographer is definitely tremendous in order to make sure that they can get what ultimately will make the client happy, and also work with the planning team who's dealing with all those issues as well. So, it's a fun job. Talk about high stress, stakes. But
I know. I do remember that one wedding, Laurie, we did in Big Sur. It was so hot. And I remember Lacey, who's one of my second shooters for that particular wedding. She came up to me during the ceremony. She goes, "I'm going to pass out. If I pass out here, like, what am I going to do? Like, what can you?" And I was like, "Oh my God, like, ceremony's happening, bride's coming down, and she was literally, I'm like, literally go behind,
yeah,
go behind that freaking fence and pass out over there. I'll get you."
I know.
So I recall that wedding, and it was very unusual because, Big Sur does not get over 100 degrees. And that day was just gnarly.
Oh, so did she pass out?
No, I was like, it was someone from the team at the Big Sur at the hotel that noticed that she was like, not looking so good. So he's so smart, got some water, she went into the shade. She was fine. 10 minutes later, she was fine. But I was like, you know what? Go behind this thing and just chill, relax. Like,
yeah.
I got it. Don't worry. But, it's we get definitely put up against so many, weather, and you're right. I've been in situations where there's been freaking, like, literally tornadoes, not with Laurie's, but like, and what do you got to do? You have to make sure that you can still perform. And talk about pressure.
Yeah, really. My God. I want to make sure that you're aware of two other shows that are on the Wedding Biz Network. First are 2 seasons of Stop and Smell the Roses, hosted by well-known event designer Preston Bailey. Preston speaks with such an honest and sincere voice. This is the only platform in which you can hear this legend of the industry share secrets to his success. Also, check out the 140 episodes of The Business of Being Creative, hosted by Sean Lowe. Sean's consulting firm, The Business of Being Creative, is full of topics and advice for any creative business with a focus on the event and interior design industry. You can find both shows at theweddingbiznetwork.com or on your cell phone's podcast app for both Stop and Smell the Roses and The Business of Being Creative. Laurie, earlier you mentioned the guest experience. I'm asking this of both of you. What's important for the guest experience from both your perspectives as a planner, designer, and a photographer?
Well, when I'm looking for a venue, there's a lot of things that are on my checklist for a venue, but typically the venues, a lot of the really fun venues to create in are more raw spaces. And so the challenge of those spaces is to make sure that there's even ground so people can walk from point A to point B. And if there isn't, you have to create pathways, and you've got to figure out, if you're creating tents, how the trucks are going to load in so that they don't scar up the landscape for the guest experience and for Jose's photos. And there's a lot to consider, but I've been very fortunate to have honed my business in Northern California, where the weather is pretty good for weddings most of the year. And there isn't a lot of mosquitoes. There aren't a lot of mosquitoes and different things that can hinder other locations around the world. So we love creating something from nothing. And it's a lot more work, but it's also a lot more reward. And when I'm done, I'm so incredibly proud to work in those environments. So like we did with Whitney's wedding, Jose, on that bluff, or in Jackson Hole, where we created all that pathway and all of that.
How long was that? You should tell Andy how long that pathway was. That was insane.
It was between 3/4 of a mile and a mile of a beautiful wooden pathway that went through the sagebrush on the client's property. And it took over a month to build. And it was so special.
All custom, all beautiful. The attention to detail on literally just the pathway was insane.
Yeah, it was really special. The client really wanted the guest experience to be good. And one of their closest friends in the world has some mobility issues. So they really went really far and above to create a very smooth transition into everything so that he would feel a part of everything and not isolated. So.
Well, and knowing you, I'm imagining that all along that path must have just been an experience for people just to take that walk, put them in a zone, put them in a mood.
Yeah. So after the ceremony, there was a marching band from Elon Artists. It was super fun. The bride and groom were very fun, and they had a vision that wasn't they didn't want a stereotypical Jackson Hole wedding. They wanted it to be more modern, and we definitely gave them a much more modern experience. But the marching band led guests from the ceremony to cocktails, and it was a surprise. They popped out of the bushes. And anyway, Jose got those moments, and it was very festive. And then after cocktails, the sun was going down a little bit, and they meandered through another path over to the tent that was kind of hidden. And I think it was very special for everyone.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds wonderful. In terms of venues, overall, from each of your perspectives, what makes for a great venue? What are the elements that you each really like to see in a great venue, the choosing of a venue?
Well, it's interesting. I think I'll let Jose speak to his part. I kind of have a few other areas in terms of guest experience and client issues that come up when picking a venue. Jose, of course, is thinking mostly about the beauty of the light and the unique setting and whatever else is happening on the site. But I always like to think about, if it's in an interesting, unique location, there has to be hotel accommodations within about 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes max. And a lot of the most beautiful venues, unfortunately, don't offer that. And so, typically my clients want a 5-star hotel nearby for a portion of their guests. And then probably a 3 or 4-star is fine for a big portion, but it's the 5-star hotels that really don't exist. There's incredible areas, but you might only have Holiday Inn Express or something like that in the area. So that's one big thing. A lot of my clients really are concerned about people flying in from all over, and they don't want the client or the guests to have to go on 3 different planes and travel and just be so exhausted by the time they get there. As tempting as it is, they also feel a little guilty. It's not to say that some people, not that they don't care, but some people are willing to do that just for their ultimate location. But that's something that I always look at first and foremost. And then the weather that time of year and what it offers. And you have to make sure that there are hotels, that there's no like Monte Carlo race, or in Napa, some huge festival, or, there's all sorts of things, that big sort of groups that come into different areas, and you need to make sure that you're not going on one of those weekends, because it could really mess up traffic and just congestion. So there's a lot of those factors that we look at. And of course, weather is important, because ideally we want the client and the guests to be there during a beautiful time of year if possible.
Yeah, all those are really good points. Jose, what about for you from, photographer's perspective? What are some of the key elements that make a really good venue for you?
I love architecture, and which is why I really love photographing like outside of the country, let's be honest, because I photograph so much in this country that I've been to so many amazing properties here. And sometimes, Laurie and I will chat about, okay, even just for her masterclass, for example, we'll brainstorm on locations and where can we do this masterclass that will make it so unique and, beautiful with the experiences that Laurie wants to create for her attendees. So I love architecture. I love history. I love textures, but I also really love a blank slate, like Laurie was talking about. With the Jackson Hole wedding, she created this beautiful, for one of the rehearsal dinners. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous tent in the middle of a field and with the Tetons in the back. I mean, that was just beautiful. And I'm always looking at lighting. I'm always looking at also simplifying the backdrop as well, so that it's really more about the subject versus maybe the background, even though I do love the backdrops and I'm very inspired by that. But I want to make it about the client and the moments versus the actual location. Of course, the location will help us. But I think about things like, how big are these venues? Or, how much property are we dealing with? Is there a lot of shrubbery? Or let's say, are we in the woods? Things like that, because that will affect the way that I photograph, or maybe even in turn kind of give me an idea as to like what type of equipment I will be shooting or what I will be needing to shoot during those moments. Like, Laurie and I did a wedding. Actually, it was a rehearsal dinner in a wooded area up north. It was really beautiful. It was a themed type event, and it was darker, and I had never been to that location, but it was beautiful. And so, there was a little bit of struggle when it comes with film, a tiny bit, just because, film is harder to photograph in low light. Of course, I also shoot digital too, but you always want to kind of just get a sense of like what type of location we're shooting in to make sure that it does become something that we can photograph and make it so that it's all consistent versus like when we're photographing indoors at a getting ready room to the outdoors. So it all has to be consistent. And that location was gorgeous because, the lighting was coming through the trees and there was a little bit of mist in the air. It was just like these rays of light coming through, and it was amazing. So that kind of allowed me to have that sort of mood. And I love having mood, and I think the reason I love filmmakers and video at weddings is because you can really get a sense of the mood. Sometimes with certain locations, it can be really hard to capture in a still. Sometimes you can photograph, all day long, but you still can't really get the vibe and the mood of the location with still photography. With video, it's different because you can do drones, and these days, and there's motion and you can see people moving and the smoke in the air, if there's like from the candles or whatever, like I love that about film. With video, with photography, it's a little bit it's a little bit different. It's a little harder, but we do use different lenses and possible filters and lighting, scenarios to be able to kind of create that mood.
Yeah, well, interesting. Before we both go, we all go, I want to also ask what you're each seeing in terms of the return of weddings. Now that looks like getting toward the end of COVID, hopefully, seems like it. What are you both seeing with your schedules and also destination weddings, given travel overseas? What are you seeing?
On my side, I don't have any international weddings in Europe or Asia right now. I had, and then they postponed. So now we're at 2022 with these European and Asian countries. But I was just in Mexico. So Mexico seems to be pretty relaxed when it comes to COVID. Of course, you need COVID tests to come back into the country and to go to these hotels and things like that. But right now, nothing really internationally besides Mexico. So we'll see. I think 2022 is looking positive.
Yeah. What about you, Laurie?
Yeah, I mean, I am so busy. I feel like the floodgates opened, and we knew that this would happen if they got a hold of, the virus and figured out the vaccines, that all of a sudden all of our clients that postponed, we now have to do final site visits and final tastings and all of this in addition to creating their weddings this year. So it's exciting. I just had a wedding last weekend. I had a wedding 2 weeks ago with Jose in LA. In terms of destination, international right now, I only have Mexico as well for next year. I'm hoping that Italy, I have a client that might be interested in Portugal for next year. So anyway, it's looking good, but I knock on wood because I don't want to jinx anything, but I feel like the weddings are back and I'm inspired and excited and ready to kind of dive deep into making these clients' dreams come true.
Yeah, it's so hard to believe that it's been, a year and 2 months. It's just crazy. But, well, look, thank you both for coming on here, especially at the same time. I just so much admire both of your work and know that you do great stuff together. So, thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Laurie Arons and Jose Villa. For website and social media information, go to the show notes on your cell phone podcast app or at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And our next guest in 2 weeks is going to be Lynn Stevens with Think Splendid, a very popular consultant. And finally, you can follow The Wedding Biz on Instagram at The Wedding Biz, and we'll catch you in a couple weeks.